Let's discuss the topic with our guest on the air. Amir Chokaki is joining us, an Iranian political analyst and journalist. Amir, welcome to the Freedom Broadcast.
Good evening, greetings to the people of Ukraine, and thank you for the invitation.
Amir, it's always a pleasure when you join us and share your comments. You know, it's actually interesting to hear your opinion about the situation near the Hormuz Strait. After all, delays really don't play into anyone's hands. For many countries, including the United States of America and its partners. And on one hand, Iran says that under no circumstances does it intend to allow the normal passage of ships through this strait, while the so-called operation by the United States of America and Israel continues. On the other hand, the United States of America, in fact, warns that they are not going to stand on ceremony about this. But so far, everything is limited to little more than warnings, and it seems as if only Iran is actually taking action in this direction. Is that really how things look, and how do you generally envision the development of events? Yes?
The question is about the leadership. It's important, and even now today as well, Tehran is under fire, and it will be under American missile strikes all night long. Of course, the Iranian people were glad when the spiritual leader Ali Khamenei, the dictator, was killed. This was on February 28th. As the Prime Minister said, Germany today, it seems, has started a war. There were successful strikes on military infrastructure at first, but then every day. As we see what is happening, there is no plan for how they want to end the war. This clearly demonstrates the fact that Iran, the Islamic Republic, we deeply regret that there is now an Islamic State in Iran. As for how the Islamic State will take its first steps, I think that's actually probably quite unlikely in the current geopolitical climate. This is because they, as they often say themselves, are currently fighting a desperate battle for their very survival right now, and the situation is very unclear. A successor to Ali Khamenei was chosen, Mojtaba Khamenei, his second son, but he still hasn't appeared. There's even news that he's in the hospital and seriously wounded. We're not even sure if he knows about the scale of it at all. Khamenei became the third leader of Iran. And also, of course, there's the fact that there is no air defense, and there never was strong air defense. They destroyed a lot of small boats, missiles or launches, and missile installations. They really did destroy them. Iranian boats, the Iranian Navy had some, not a huge number, but they did have them. And I think people are very worried. What are Iranians afraid of? You mentioned the region. Of course, the Arab countries didn't want this war at all, and they still don't want it. But the question is about the Iranians. You understand? Iranians don't know how it will end. There's this scenario. When we hear Trump, he says something new every day. And now he's talking again about Venezuela, about how successfully he's working in Venezuela, and some kind of similar scenario for Iran. But do you understand what that means? That some spiritual leader will be replaced by another leader? But this is an Islamic state. I believe now that the Islamic Slavs have no hope of defeating America. But they can continue the war for a long time. They can keep striking the region as much as they can. They can raise the price of oil again, higher than it was before. Right now it has dropped, but it could rise again. It's a very uncertain situation.
There is no chance of victory, but they can influence global trade. I'm also interested in your opinion. Usually when the situation is very complicated and almost deadlocked, mediators get involved. And, well, at least for me, only two options for mediation come to mind. Well, I don't know, China and Oman. And moreover, as far as I'm concerned, maybe you'll correct me, China is unlikely, because what levers of influence does China have? Political, economic? It seems to me that right now the regime in Iran, well, not really, isn't that interested, especially since Russia can apparently already replace Iran's oil supply volumes to China. It's unclear to what extent Iran is willing to listen to China in this situation. But Oman geographically is located near the Strait of Hormuz. And it seems as if Oman is secretly there. It negotiates with Iran, but also maintains pretty good relations with the West. And in principle is personally interested in ensuring that the situation in the Strait of Hormuz remains stable. Do you, in general, have any hope for mediators? Do you see a scenario where mediators will be called upon to play a role in this situation?
I believe it's already happening. Let's even include dictator Putin in this. And yesterday, there was a conversation between Trump and Putin, and apparently, according to Ushakov, Putin proposed some options. I believe that none of his options are actually workable because he is interested in preserving the Islamic Republic, especially after the events in Syria. This is not in the interests of the Iranian peoples, including Israel. Israel has its own points on which it has pressured the authorities. With Trump, it's not quite the same. But regarding China, China has already received guarantees from the Iranian side to pass through the Black Sea without any obstacles. So it's already happening. Chinese ships are already passing through. Therefore, I find myself in complete agreement with your assessment that China is unlikely to take an active or direct role. Much like Putin, it will also try to play the role of a mediator in order to leverage its influence by playing the strategic Syrian card. But ultimately, the main priority for China is to secure its long-term access to vital oil supplies. It gets oil from Iran, and now it's looking to get it from the Arab countries. Oman, as you know, is a small country. It has no influence over Trump. I want to put it this way. I believe Trump is ready to end the war even tomorrow, but Netanyahu is not. Their goals don't quite align right now. Donald Trump is of the firm belief that if Tehran now reaches a comprehensive agreement with the United States, say to completely suspend its nuclear enrichment program, stop all missile production, and no longer work with any proxy groups, or at least make a formal promise to do so, he will publicly proclaim himself to be the ultimate victor in the situation. And I really believe there is such a possibility, maybe even a ground operation will begin. Because let's not forget, there are 450 kilograms. Uranium enrichment at 60%. That is certainly enough uranium to construct several compact tactical nuclear weapons, including dangerous dirty bombs. It is certainly a very real possibility to consider. If the current labor strike does not come to an end by the conclusion of this week, I think we should realistically expect it to continue for a few more weeks, and possibly all sides across America will eventually be forced to provide a thorough justification for their actions.
Amir, I want you to remind me again, did I hear correctly at the beginning of your answer? Did you say that in principle mediation is happening and that Russia is acting as a rather mediocre mediator?
Yes, and
Do you really think that I
said,
Yes, that's all. Okay. I just wanted to get confirmation you answered very comprehensively. Let's get back to this. Can Russia really be considered a mediator? It continues to supply Iran with intelligence, and of course, there is this rhetoric that Putin supposedly says, let's move to a diplomatic settlement. We know Putin. This is just a game, an attempt to sit on two chairs at once. Putin, well, in my opinion, forgive me if this sounds too judgmental, but he cannot be a mediator. Russia cannot be a mediator because the regime in Russia is not much different from the regime in Iran. Yes, maybe not in relation to the population inside the country, although I think Putin is willing to go very far to silence even his own people. But in principle, this terrorist policy is quite similar in both Iran and Putin. And can one dictator, so to speak, be a mediator in a conversation with other dictators?
yes, thank you for clarifying the question. I believe that Putin wants to play the role of mediator, but in reality, his interest lies in dragging out the war, in a long, drawn-out war. In other words, the longer the war continues, the better it is for Putin. So he doesn't truly want to end this war, he wants it to go on. Yes, I believe that Putin and the Kremlin are providing certain data through their agents to Iran in order to strike American targets. That's what I believe is really happening. That is, if China is not helping militarily and not helping in that way, and even China has no interest in a prolonged war in the Middle East, Putin, on the other hand, does have an interest. He understands the benefits of prolonging the war. But let's not forget, the Iranians also don't want the war to end tomorrow if the result is that the Islamic Republic remains. This is a very important point. So what are we afraid of? We are afraid of the preservation of the Islamic State. I think the wishes of the Iranian people coincide with the wishes of the president of Ukraine, Zelensky. He says the same thing. That's why Putin supposedly plays the role of mediator. He talks to Trump, he talks to Petrosian, we know that. But for what purpose? To get more benefits again in this invasion against Ukraine. But we understand that Trump is in front of us. And I don't believe that Putin will act in the interests of the Iranian people. But he is in contact with Washington. But how does Trump understand him? But Trump is surely trying through Putin to achieve the surrender to the state federation. But Tehran, if the scale is Khamenei, the successor of Ali Khamenei, is going to sign all the documents and surrender to Trump, then it is no longer a country or a state. This is a very complicated situation. It's very complicated. I admit it's very complicated. But I don't think that Putin's interests are not those of the Iranian people. He would have been very happy if Khamenei were alive. He was the one who congratulated the successor, Mojtaba Khamenei. And that's how it is. That's what we know. Iranians.
Yes, he expressed
Sympathy. These are Iranians' sympathy. They called him a great man, Ali Khamenei. When Ali Khamenei was killed, people went out into the streets. They weren't afraid and they danced in Iran, in Tehran, in different cities. But we're not confused about this. Iranians know who Putin is. But we're saying, what does he want? He wants to play this kind of game. But for now, I believe there is no such mediator who wants to resolve the issue positively. And the illusion of Tehran, we still see it to this day. And what do we hear from Tehran? For now, this is an illusion. Maintain uranium enrichment technology and don't talk about missile range. But in fact, I think the war, as I said, the war, if it continues for another 9 weeks, we can expect a ground survey from America.
this specific item right here.
There will be a difficult situation. It will be even worse. Amen.